Friends, to continue with it, if you remember, I told you about conjunctions. Out of the 8 parts of speech, conjunction is what we are going to understand, which will help to identify the nature of a subject. Let's begin with the conditions onto which we are going to work out. So, conjunction and specifically and its use. Condition 1 basically talks of the usage of and as one of the conjunctions. So if I had to put it up into a formula base, it would rather become as subject plus and plus subject. Why? Because and as a conjunction always sits between two subjects. So the base of this aspect basically talks of that if and as a conjunction comes between two subjects, the derivative has to be that the subject will be taken as plural in nature. So if I had to put it into an example, the example can be Ravi and Radha works smartly. So logically, when I have and between two single subjects here, that makes it as plural, and when I have this subject as my plural, so my fourth formula, if you remember the 4 formulas, out of which the fourth formula basically sits with when the subject is plural and is associated with an action verb, the action verb will be without an S. So that's where it will be Ravi and Radha work smartly. That is how we come on to the derivatives of sentences. So this is the very first example of the usage when we talk of and as a conjunction, when the subject is considered plural. Coming on to the second, if I say that rule number 2 talks of two single nouns joined by and. Example, say for example, the secretary happens to be a noun, secretary and president. Now the point is, the rule number 2 talks of two single nouns joined by and use of articles. What difference does it play? So let's begin with the first one, the secretary and the president. What we see here is the usage of this article prior and post the conjunction and, as well as one more example, the secretary and president. Now what are we supposed to understand here is the use of article the prior and post the noun basically is taken up as two individual nouns. That means it will be considered plural. And in this case, the secretary and president, because there is no the as an article with this noun, that is where we are referring to one single person. So this whole becomes single subject. That is where the secretary and president were present. Because there is no article the here, that's why we will consider it as single. And here relative verb always sits with a single natured subject. So that's why the secretary and president was present. Here if we had to talk of it, the secretary and the president, it will probably take up were present. So this is how we work it out with the usage of and the addition of article the. I hope you are trying to understand and you have got a glimpses of the nitty-gritties. Okay, coming on to the third rule. The rule number 3 talks of the names of sports team is always considered plural. Example, England, India, Spain, Barcelona. Any country, the name of the team is considered plural and not the word team. If you take the India team, that is when we are working out on plural single. But if I say, for an example, India have won the match. So since the rule says the name of the sports team is always considered plural, we will say that India have won the match. Did you get the difference? Let me bring it back to again. If we have India team have won the match. So if it had to be a combination of these two, where the name of the country comes with the word team. Team being a collective noun has to be single. Thus, I am referring to the India team which happens to be single. That is where I will take this sentence as India team has won the match. But if this was not there, this word, the collective noun as the word team would have not been there, and I make a sentence like India have won the team. So as per rule number 3, it says the names of sports teams, the names, only the names. So if I have the name of a sports team by the name of India, I will only take India in the sentence with the verb to be a part of the predicate. So the sentence becomes India have won the match, out of which if I had to choose between the relative verb, I would go with plural. Why? Because the rule says the names of sports team is always considered as subject plural. I hope you have understood the difference between the usage of names of sports teams like only India or England or Barcelona, as well as the difference of India team, England team, Barcelona team. Get the idea? Well, hope you have understood now. Coming on to rule number 4. The rule says if two different singular nouns expresses one idea, then the subject will be considered single. Let's take an example. This is are the long and the short of the case. So if I say two different single nouns expressing one idea, that means I am talking about the long and the short. It expresses the same idea. So when associated with and, it will again be considered single, and thus if a sentence comes like this is are the long and the short of the case, because of this rule number 4, I will consider this expression of the long and the short as single entity. Thus, it will sit with a relative verb which is single in nature. If I had to make it an association with action verb, I would rather make it this makes the long and the short of the case. Now, when the subject is single, I am sure you are now aware that if the subject is single, the action verb will be with an S. Right. So the answer would be this makes the long and the short of the case. So if you remember rules, the first, second, third, fourth formulas, they are not rules. We worked out on formula number 1, 2, 3 and 4 initially. So with those formulas, you will come across every rule, and that is where you will understand the usage of those formulas then and now. Well, coming on to rule number 5. The rule number 5 talks about two subjects particularly synonymous. When we talk about two subjects particularly synonymous, that means I am talking about words which are similar in expression. So give us an example by saying his power and position have no effect on them. So if I had to put it as a rule, these words power and position are synonymous to each other. Thus, they are considered as subject which is single in nature. So, if you have an expression like this which comes into a sentence, you will have to consider that power and position are synonymous to each other, thus making it subject single. Since it is a single subject, the relative verb will obviously be single as per rule number 1. And if it had to be with the action verb, it had to be with an action verb with an S. So, his power and position has no effect on them goes with relative verb. And with action verb, his power and position does no effect on them. That is how it works. I hope you're getting what I'm trying to share. Well, coming on to rule number 6. Let's say rule number 6 talks of percent of a part of something, like 20%, as I have given an example. So 20 of every 100 women are illiterate. Now let's go back to the rule. The rule says percent of a part of something should be considered as subject, which is plural in nature. So if I say 20 of every 100 women, so here this is woman, basically talks of part. This is the part of 100 women. So logically, when I talk of this, I am again referring to subject, which is plural. So what happens is, if this kind of an expression, 20 of every 100 women are illiterate, I will sit with are. Why? Because as per the rule, the subject happens to be plural in nature. Thus, if the subject, which is plural in nature, sits with relative verb, the nature of the relative verb will be similar to the nature of the subject. Good. Similarly, if I take action verb, I'll say 20 of every 100 women counts to be or to illiteracy. Counts to illiteracy. So 20 of every 100 women counts to illiteracy. So if my subject is plural, ought to be that I will not take this, I will go with this. So the sentence would be 20 of every 100 women count to illiteracy. That makes the agreement of the verb with the subject as understood as subject plural. This is as per rule number 6. Coming to our last rule with reference to the conjunction and. The last rule here basically talks of subjects combined by and preceded by each other or every. That means if I have a sentence like each man and each woman, each man, each woman combined by and. So if we have this kind of a structural sentence, I would probably say that the subject will be considered single. Here, if the subject is considered single, I will have each man and each woman has the right to express. And this is with relative verb. With action verb, it will be each man and each woman speaks of the policy. So because this is single and relative verb goes single and action verb has to be with an S. So these are certain rules which I want you to follow and go through. I will come back with certain more rules to help you out with further topic. Thank you.